Not doing philosophy is, in its own quiet way, still a kind of philosophy. The philosophy of the Western world has long carried itself like the biggest boss in the room. It believes it can understand everything, that the entire structure of the world, the whole framework of existence, belongs to it alone. Any other way of thinking, any other kind of conversation, has to walk up to this boss and prove itself worthy before it can be taken seriously. Even the careful, reasoned study of religion, what we call rational theology, quietly bends its knee to this same authority. If religion wants to protect a few of its deepest claims from philosophy's reach, it has to first admit something uncomfortable, that those claims simply cannot be proven the way philosophy proves things. And why does Western philosophy get to sit on this throne? Because here, thought and reality fit together almost perfectly. When we think, we never really leave the boundary of this world's existence. For anything in this world to appear simply means to lay itself open before our thinking so that we may grasp it, to come forward, to be understood. That, in the end, is what having meaning actually means. Rationality is nothing more than our thought continuously stepping out from the raw power of the world around us. Put simply, meaningful thought and thinking about the world are really just two faces of the same coin. Which brings us to something strange. If this boss philosophy is so complete, shouldn't it be able to hold God too? Especially the God of the Bible, if he truly means anything at all? But here is the catch. The instant we bring God into the space of our thinking, he shrinks. He becomes just another thing in the world, another entity among entities. And if the serious study of religion never quite reaches the rigor of philosophy, it is not because it treats God as a mere object. It is because it drags God down into the ordinary traffic of the world. But the truth, if we are honest, is that the God of the Bible stands far above this ordinary world and its everyday existence. There is transcendence here. And it is no accident that the history of Western philosophy has, in many ways, been the long history of erasing this very idea. The idea of something above the world. Religious thought tries to lift God to the highest place while still treating him as part of this world. But here's a question worth sitting with. Is this word height borrowed, after all, from the sky above us, really something our ordinary thinking can hold? Doesn't it place God so far beyond our grasp that we can no longer think of him as one more ordinary thing? Some would even go further and say the God of the Bible has no meaning at all, that he simply cannot be understood. A writer named Madame Delhomme wrote in a recent book that the idea of God is not a difficult idea. It is not an idea at all. This, she says, is the thinking of those who refuse to accept that God stands above our everyday understanding, who assume that whatever the Bible calls beyond understanding simply hasn't climbed the first step of understanding yet. So the largest question now standing in front of us is this: is the meaning we speak of in philosophy already something reduced, something shrunken? Is it perhaps only a copy, a faint wandering shadow of a fuller meaning? We have to ask whether there exists a meaning beyond this ordinary rationality, beyond the things of this world. A meaning that was already there before the world itself began. And stepping outside the world of ordinary things does not automatically mean falling into blind faith or mere opinion. Because, in truth, even faith and opinion still speak in the language of this world. What we are really trying to explore here is whether there can be a rational, thoughtful way of speaking about God, one that is neither ordinary philosophy nor blind faith. In doing so, we are quietly dismantling an old wall, the wall that insists there are only two gods available to us, the God of faith without philosophy on one side, and the God of the philosophers on the other. We are simply asking, are these really the only two paths open to us? We spoke earlier about how, in Western thought, meaning and intelligibility are tied directly to how the world's existence shows itself to us. It's almost as if the entire purpose of the world's being were simply to display itself clearly, to become part of our experience. Every experience we have seems to wait for exactly this. When we lay something fully open before ourselves, it feels as though the work of truth has been completed. But if the meaning of existence is only this, showing itself, then what, really, is this act of showing? It becomes little more than the display of a display, the truth of a truth, folding endlessly back on itself. Philosophy draws its shape and its material entirely from this art of showing. Bound as it is to the things of the world, it keeps running toward knowledge and toward truth, like a restless journey between darkness and light, an adventure with no final rest. In the Western imagination, the soul, the spirit, is essentially defined as knowing. But knowing, here, is a little like looking at the outside world through a mirror. Its real meaning only becomes clear when we begin from consciousness itself, from our own awareness. Now think about this slowly. Suppose consciousness is, in some sense, a transformed shape of insomnia, of sleeplessness. When we stay awake and gather the world before us, that gathering becomes our consciousness. This wakefulness, this constant alertness, is not simply the absence of sleep. It is something deeper, something that existed even before sleep and wakefulness were ever separated. Sleep is always playing a quiet game with this alertness, trying to slip away and yet somehow still obeying its command to stay awake. And when we are fully awake, some other presence disturbs our stillness, breaks our sameness, takes away our rest. This other lives within us, and rather than pulling us away from ourselves, it wakes us up. This waking is a demand that no amount of rest can ever fully quiet. In older language, we might call this the soul, continuously being drawn out of its old, settled condition. This sleeplessness is a wakefulness with no object, no destination. We are simply awake, without chasing anything in particular. It has no fixed shape, no edge. It is only an endless unfolding, an infinity, an emptiness that can never be filled. Now, our consciousness. It has, in a sense, cut its ties with that meaningless wakefulness. It insists instead on keeping things steady, keeping them present before us. And being present only becomes possible when our awareness folds back upon itself, when it returns from that sleeplessness. In a strange way, it circles back into that very state of restlessness it tried to escape. For something to remain present before us really means presenting it again and again, endlessly. When we say "I think," we are gathering things together and drawing them before ourselves. This is not merely mental effort. It is the art of laying things out with such depth and precision that the whole act becomes a kind of tension, a tautness. Our awareness is like a sharp beam of light sweeping from one corner of existence to the other. And in that light, nothing of being can hide for long. Whatever slips into yesterday, history and memory pull it back into view. Through consciousness, even the distant past becomes, in a way, a reshaped form of today. Nothing in this world can pass by unnoticed, unaccounted for. And so the present moment plays on inside our consciousness like a musical note that never quite stops. Not something arriving from outside, but simply part of what it means for us to be present today. And so, finally, what is philosophy? It is not some strange or idle curiosity. It is the practice of bringing things before us, again and again. It is the quiet work of making our present moment stand more clearly in front of us. Philosophy is not merely knowledge about some inner world. It is that inner world. It gathers everything into itself, an emotion rising in the heart, a flicker of anxiety, even the trembling fear of God. And yet none of this fully disturbs the underlying peace of our awareness. The thinker Husserl pointed out something similar, that behind our values, behind our desires, it is ultimately the mind doing the work, building a picture, a representation of everything it encounters. It is an art of laying things out clearly before us, refusing to let anything slip from our grasp. In simple terms, everything, in the end, stays within us. But here is something worth pausing on. We can only treat our emotions as mere play of the mind for as long as we think of them simply as desires. The way the old thinker Pascal described them, a desire either satisfied by joy or left aching by its absence. Even behind emotions like these, our consciousness is quietly at work, trying to hold and understand everything within its grip. But could there not be some feeling, some emotion, that erupts and breaks this very grip of the mind? A feeling that steps outside our inner world and rises far above it? This is the other world we will try to speak of next. Let's turn, for a moment, to religion itself. If a religious thought insists it is entirely separate from philosophy, and yet still leans on personal experience to make its case, it quietly slips back into philosophy's orbit. When someone narrates their own religious experience, they have not actually broken through philosophy's wall. It may well be that the word God originated within religion, but the moment philosophy takes hold of it, it turns God into a theme, a subject, a meaning to be examined. And oddly enough, religious people often accept this very framing too, treating the appearance of God as just another experience, unable to imagine that there might be another way of speaking about God altogether, one that isn't simply the retelling of an experience. And so, without quite meaning to, a religious person often ends up seeing God as nothing more than a personal experience, one more piece of this world's being. So here's the first real question. Can we speak about God without turning him into a theme, a subject? Is naming God simply a way of calling out to something? Or does it carry another kind of meaning entirely? The moment we reduce God to a theme, a subject to be studied, we lose the very thing that could break apart the quiet arrogance hiding inside our I think. The philosopher Descartes said something remarkable while thinking about God. He described how the very idea of God shatters our awareness, our consciousness, even while he still considered God the highest being, an eminent being in his own right. But what matters most to us about Descartes is not that he offered proofs for God's existence. What matters is that his words shook the sleep right out of our awareness, jolting us out of that deep sleep we fall into whenever we believe we have already understood everything. The idea of God cannot be locked inside any box. It is so vast that it spills far beyond the capacity of our thinking. The very thing we are trying to think shatters the walls of our own thought as we think it. Another philosopher, Malebranche, went deeper still. He said we cannot imprison God within the mind. The idea of God lives within us, and yet it breaks apart the very consciousness that tries to grasp it. It is not that we have ever fully understood God, and yet the infinite still exists within us. It seems that the infinite's presence inside us is a relationship that lies entirely beyond our grip. For us, it is a strangely calm, entirely passive condition. Or, put another way, the word infinite carries two ideas folded into its very name, that it breaks the limits of our small world, that it is, quite literally, non-finite. When we say, I think, we feel, for a moment, like kings of our own minds, with everything under our control. And then, suddenly, something enters our thinking that we cannot possibly contain in our small mind. This is the infinite, the idea of a God who never ends. Descartes, in his third meditation, makes a genuinely startling claim. He says that his understanding of the infinite exists within him even before his own existence does. In other words, he knows God before he knows himself. And when this infinite enters us, our mind is thrown into a completely empty, entirely passive state. Is this still even our consciousness? This is not some ordinary welcome, the way we might invite a guest into our home. It is closer to a deep shock, one that jolts us awake. Can we even say, truthfully, that some idea was simply placed inside us? Our mind always wants to stamp everything with its own mark, to say, I did this. But the idea of the infinite is older than our memories, older than anything ever placed before us. Its meaning is settled long before it ever appears to us. It is like that deep jolt, as though the infinite has woken a mind that, until then, had never truly been awake. It arrives like a command, like a deep and unavoidable demand. We said earlier that this is not merely a claim from the pages of a book, that the infinite cuts through our small, finite world. The truth is, the distance between the infinite and our small world runs very deep. The infinite matters to our world. It remains far from us, and yet it lives within us. When the idea of the infinite is placed inside me, it simply means my thinking can never fully grasp it. And, interestingly enough, this very failure to fully understand becomes the true foundation of our thinking. The infinite completely dismantles our thought, and at the very same time, it calls out to it, wakes it up. This waking is no ordinary experience. The idea of the infinite questions every experience we have ever had. It is not even like being struck by the arrow of love, the kind that sweeps us into some pleasant feeling. This meaning does not live only in things that appear before us or in things that lead somewhere. So then, what is the real meaning behind this whole story? When this astonishing infinite enters me, what actually happens? It is a deep shock. One in which every screw, every fastening that once held our inner world together comes loose. We cannot hold it in our grip. No foundation can contain it. It is like a consuming fire, a dazzling light so bright that far more pours in than our eyes can ever take in. It is a touch that burns, and this shock gives birth to a very deep longing within us. But take note, this longing is nothing like our everyday needs. Ordinary needs, like hunger or rest, come to an end once they are satisfied. But this longing for the infinite never ends. The closer we come to it, the more this longing grows. It is a strange, inverted kind of hunger, a longing for a goodness that never runs its course. But the story doesn't end here. A question rises naturally. If the infinite within me is really just a longing, isn't that longing, in the end, still for my own pleasure, my own benefit? How can we even call this infinite good when it feels so far beyond our reach, almost indifferent to us? Love only becomes possible when the idea of the infinite lives within us. It is that more inside us, the part that shakes our small world awake. It breaks apart the comforting idea of ever arriving somewhere, of a happy ending. Plato, through the voice of Aristophanes in his comedy, said something quite startling, that there are people who spend their entire lives together and still cannot say what they truly want from one another. Some say love means two becoming one, but in saying that, they turn love into a destination, folding it neatly into memories of the past. Why, then, can lovers never quite say what they are really asking of each other beyond physical pleasure? A thinker named Diotima says that love is always hungry for something, and at times, it can even turn a little coarse, a little vulgar. When we wait or weep for someone we desire, we often end up cherishing an image, a memory of them, and take a strange pleasure in that very waiting. Perhaps every kind of physical love, every eroticism, carries within it a trace of something crude, something almost pornographic. When that restless, infinite longing drains out of love, all that remains is a hunger to satisfy oneself. In this kind of love, the I takes over completely, and we end up trapped inside our own pleasure, our own small world. So, can there be a love that rises above both meaning and mere physical desire? When the infinite touches our longing, we never quite arrive at a place where we can say, enough, no more. The closer we get to this destination, the hungrier we become. It is a strange, reversed kind of game. But how can we live inside this endless longing without falling into greed? And in this world of pleasure, who will teach us what goodness even means? A longing without a fixed goal only becomes possible when the God we long for remains separate from our longing, untouched, sacred. And this becomes real only when that longed for God turns me instead toward another person, someone I might not even particularly like, another human being. This other person is the one who truly wakes us. This is our responsibility toward our neighbor, our companion. We are even asked to stand in their place, to think as they think. This, in the end, is what real goodness means. It is a love without greed, without any trace of self-interest. It is the very recognition of right and wrong, the very mark of being human. Here, our I is no king proclaiming I think. Instead, it stands in service to this other person. Here, the I is like a hostage, bound to help without demanding a promise, without even needing to be asked. We have given this particular way God works a special name, Eleity, God's own distant presence. God plays a strange game with us. He draws our longing toward himself, and then, just as suddenly, redirects it toward the people around us. In this way, the longed for God slips out of our grasp entirely. Goodness never sleeps. It doesn't call us directly to itself. Instead, it turns us towards serving others. Only through this path can we ever truly reach real goodness. It is a path higher, even than the shortest straight line. God remains like a third person, distant and sacred, and yet somehow hidden deep within us. God is good, not because he fills our hands with good things, but because he compels us toward doing good, something far greater than any gift could ever be. Seen through the eyes of the world, being good might look like foolishness, like bringing harm upon oneself. But in truth, it is a rising far above the very existence of this world. It is the recognition of right and wrong itself. And in this movement, where God turns us toward another person, he never appears before us as some object, some thing. God's very distance from us becomes, for me, a responsibility toward another person, a responsibility utterly free of self-interest. Everything we have said so far about God's transcendence, about the infinite, only truly connects to right, wrong, and humanity when we draw close to a neighbor and take up our responsibility for that other person. You might feel, up to this point, that this idea of remaining passive is just something bookish, something invented. When we live inside our small world, we stay busy simply gathering the things placed before us. But this passivity we speak of really means something else, that we have endured a deep shock, a shock older than any past we can remember, one we could never claim as entirely our own. This shock was delivered by the infinite. It has shattered our carefully built world and woken us to the pain of another person. This infinite cannot be locked inside any box of thought. It lies far above our greed, far above the things of this world. And this deep shock that the infinite has delivered to our world takes shape in real life as our responsibility toward others. It is a thought that thinks beyond its own limits. This is our longing, and this is the command to serve another. When we say that our true identity lies in taking up responsibility for another, it means, in a sense, erasing ourselves completely, as though we were burning away in a fire lit for someone else. The light of our identity shines only through this very devotion, this very burning. Here, our I builds no shield to protect itself, keeps no ledger of its own benefit. In the Bible, Abraham prays to God, saying he is nothing but dust and ashes, and Moses, with deep humility, asks, "Who are we, really? What does this truly mean?" It means that our I has been uprooted from its old pride, its old ego, its old performance. This is not a responsibility that can be measured or weighed. And curiously, the more you help others, the more your responsibility grows, and it grows in the most remarkable way. This is the I that, when called, simply answers, "Here I am." The great writer Dostoevsky wrote in The Brothers Karamazov that we are all guilty before everyone, and for everything, and that he himself is guiltier than all the rest. What is spoken here is not merely the words of a book. It is speaking directly to you. When we wake to the pain of others, a strange shiver runs through our whole body. This is the moment a human being stops being merely a shape, a structure, and becomes instead a beating heart, a pair of giving hands. Now, this I is no longer king of its own world. It is instead deeply indebted, even willing to stand in another's place. And in surrendering itself this way, it finds a wholly new identity. But there is no rest along this path. The more we obey the call of the other, the more our responsibility deepens. The closer we draw to goodness, the more it feels as though there is still so much left to do. Along this path, our I finds no corner to hide away in its small world. There are no conditions here, only an unbroken concern for others. And so, drawing close to someone is never quite enough. The I can never tire of emptying itself. This is an exhausting labor, and one that never truly ends. Here, being human is like being a hostage. This infinite, this transcendence, is not proof of God, nor merely an experience of Him. It is a testimony that was never decided in advance. So, in uncovering this quiet secret at the heart of Western philosophy, we have not sunk into the hollow depths of some empty religious experience. To say that our I is the very temple of that greatness, that transcendence, does not clash at all with the idea of the highest goodness. It reassures us that the meaning of anything is far greater than its simply being present before us. But the real question remains, has Western philosophy truly stood on this old idea all along? It has always believed that only what appears clearly before us can carry meaning. It has said that things become understandable only once they connect with one another. But for us, the true mark of meaning is being for another. Western philosophy narrowed this meaning down to mere appearance, mere existence, and tried to lock it inside a system. Understanding this greatness is not a game played by the ordinary rules of the world. God cannot be understood by confining Him within the bookish language of philosophy. Beyond this point, philosophy sees only darkness. But that does not mean God has no meaning at all. Today, philosophy is accused of having become a hollow, empty exercise. This accusation does not come from within philosophy itself. It rises instead from a human cry, from the call of a prophet, from prophecy itself. When philosophy comfortably declares that whatever is true is simply rational understanding, and in the very next moment, some human being cries out in pain, wanting to change the world, that cry lies far beyond philosophy's grasp. Long before meaning ever takes the shape of sentences, the real meaning is already hidden in people's eyes and in their cries. It arrives like a command. This meaning of our shared humanity is not meant for our clever, calculating consciousness. It is, instead, the name for simply obeying a command without fully understanding it. Here, a human being remains calmer, more passive, even beyond the act of gaining knowledge. Language, here, does nothing more than dress this real meaning in words. What is spoken and what remains unspoken play out a quiet game together, and this game breaks apart the pride of bookish logic. It proves wrong all those who wish to lock every great thought inside the small box of language. The meaning of this great infinite, this great transcendence, is simply this: to give oneself to another without a second thought. Poor humanity, with no freedom left of its own. And yet, in truth, this is a deep shock in which our own I breaks apart and divides itself. This is a singular journey that begins with God. And the truth is, this uncertainty is essential to the infinite. It must remain a mystery, a riddle, so that it can break through the grip of our small minds, which are always trying, in their own way, to overpower that very greatness. That's all for this episode. We'll meet again in a new episode of Audivoo with a new topic. Until then, thank you.